If you're new here, my name is Amy. I'm an ecologist living in Ireland, and I also love to care for houseplants indoors. So this is generally what my channel is all about. This is a big video that I feel is really needed in the plant care world, and I do feel personally that everybody can benefit from a video like this. Of course, this is all based on my own experience and my own kind of ways of figuring out plant care for the time that I've cared for plants. I do think that this is honestly one of the biggest skills that is needed in this hobby. Figuring out how to troubleshoot issues yourself is really what's going to kind of elevate you in your plant care and really be able to tailor the needs of your plants in the environment that you have them in. The reason why this is so important, of course, is that while we all might care for plants indoors, our indoor environments are not equal. So each house will have a certain level of humidity and a kind of temperature. This can also change throughout seasons in whatever country that you're living in. It's a lot more specific than maybe you might think it is. Of course, with such a skill, it is always evolving and growing as you go through your plant care and you experience new things, and that's to be said for everyone, including myself. And so this is something that is always kind of changing with you. It is a big topic, however, I have tried to kind of condense the main issues that you might come across or encounter in this video. Of course, there will be more issues that could go wrong, but I'm kind of using this as almost a bit of a guide or a key to the main issues that you might face when you're caring for your plants and how to figure out what these might mean and what to do about it. So what it all comes down to is what plants actually need to survive. If you're new to this channel, I have a plant basics series where I kind of go into a bit more of the science of plants, their structures, their functions, and how this can be applied to your plant care. That series is a lot more kind of science-based, and if you're interested in that, I will link the playlist down below that has all of the episodes. However, this is more based on experience and kind of practical tips instead. So of course, what do plants need? They need water, they need light, they need airflow, they need humidity, they need nutrients. So we kind of want to focus our care around these types of things. If some of you don't already know, I'm currently pregnant in this video. Whenever you're watching it, who knows? But at the moment I am pregnant, and it makes me think that, you know, when people have babies, there's a certain number of things that you need to tick off your list when you're caring for a baby. And that could be, are they hungry? Have they been changed? Have they gotten enough sleep? Have they gotten enough attention, etc., etc.? There's kind of a list of things that you need to go through. And that is the same for caring for anything, right? It could be a pet, it could be a plant, it could be whatever. And so those are the list of things that plants really need to survive. And it is important when you approach your plant care that you think about these things as you're going through it. Sometimes on social media, somebody will send me a picture of a plant and they'll say, what's wrong with this plant? Can you please help me with this plant? Etc., etc. And honestly, it is really difficult to answer those questions. And that is because I don't know, first, probably where you live. I don't know the environment that you're planted in. I don't know the substrate that it's in. I don't know when you last watered it. I don't know if it's too cold or warm for the plant, etc., etc. So it's kind of an impossible task. And I think that people, when they send these things, obviously they don't realize that. This is why I wanted to make this video. So of course I can ask you all of these questions and try to draw it out of you, but it really is better to learn the skill yourself. And that's how, like I said, you're going to elevate your plant care skills. So the first thing, and probably the biggest thing, and that's why we're going through it first, is yellow leaves. So I do have a Plant Basics episode called What is Chlorosis? And that goes through the science behind yellow leaves, but it also goes through quite an in-depth look at yellow leaves and why they might happen. So if you're looking for a bit more in-depth than in this video, you can head over there. However, yellowing leaves, not all yellow leaves are equal. Okay, there's different types of yellow leaves, and paying attention to the type of yellow leaf that you might be experiencing is the kind of key to figuring out what's wrong. What I will say, however, is that you can't always figure it out. Sometimes yellow leaves happen and you can't figure out why. However, there is a baseline there that I think can be quite helpful. It can also be one of the biggest indicators that something is wrong with your plant, and is generally one of the first things that happen when there's an issue. So you could have yellowing at the edges of the leaves, sometimes with browning as well. You could have yellow on the center of the leaf, like kind of through a midrib or that main vein through the middle. You could have yellowing across the entire leaf equally, all at once. You could have yellowing and maybe a bit of see-through tissue, which can be quite mushy. You could have yellowing and crispy parts of the leaf as well. So you still have to go that step further to figure out what this actually means. So yellowing at the edges of the leaves could be an issue with nutrients or root rot. So something to do with the ability of the plant to take up nutrients. So what I would first do is ask myself, is the soil drying out, or is it kind of staying waterlogged? And from that point on, you could check the roots of the plant. You may also feel the texture of the leaf. Is it kind of more floppy and sad than it usually is, or is it feeling kind of strong and hard? That could indicate also. So if the plant is kind of floppy, that might indicate to you that the roots aren't being able to take up anything from the soil, and the soil is usually still wet. So I would check the roots in that instance. It could be a sign of root rot, and if you catch it early, you may not have the floppiness yet, and it may still be able to be saved, but it is something to look at. It could also be fertilizer burn. So fertilizer burn is essentially when you over fertilize your plants. So you might be using a strong chemical fertilizer and it might be a little bit too much, and it could result in root burn, which can then result in root rot and the same kind of issues. You could have yellow spots across your leaves that are, like individual little yellow spots. In my experience, this is generally some kind of fungus or root rot situation, and it's generally a sign that something needs to be cleaned. Like I would generally clean the outsides of the plot with something like mild, like diluted alcohol or something. I would clean the outside of the pot. I might check the roots to see if they are okay. Are they rotting? Are they not? If they are starting to rot, I might alter my watering, etc. You can also gently wipe down the surface of the leaves and plant material with diluted alcohol as well. Just be careful. Make it very diluted or you will harm the plant tissues. And also check, is there mold anywhere? So this could be also an indication that something is wrong and you need to clean it up and make sure this isn't spreading to your plants. If there is some mold or there is some kind of fungus issue, airflow will help you. So your plant might be in a kind of a space where there isn't a lot of airflow. It might be shoved into a corner, it might be smothered by other plants, etc. And airflow will help kind of clean the air around the plant on top of your cleaning as well. If you have yellowing down the center of the leaf, this has happened to me just once, but it was a sign of nutrient deficiency, and I believe it was like even micronutrients that the plant wasn't being fed. So I hadn't fertilized this plant in like well over a year. It hadn't been repotted or the substrate kind of replenished. So it had used up all the nutrients in the substrate and it had no more left, and I wasn't providing any. So it was very easily fixed in the sense that I just, it gave me a kick up the butt to start fertilizing it again, and it was very happy. Now, the leaf that was damaged doesn't recover, it stays that way. However, any of the new future growth was perfect, and that was telling me that the issue was fixed. So I could just cut off those older leaves if I don't like the look of them, or just leave them as they are. On top of that, if you don't want to fertilize or you're not fertilizing, you could always top up the surface of the soil with something full of nutrients like worm castings and water that in, and that will slowly release it over time as well. If your entire leaf is yellowing kind of all at once, typically this is the most common thing that happens, I see anyway. And that is generally an issue with the watering regime. Either it's watering too much or it's watering too little, and it's just damaging the plant tissues, or the plant is deciding that there's kind of too much plant material to sustain with a low level of water or a high level of water. So kind of a subtopic of that is that if your whole leaf is yellowing, but it's also mushy, that's overwatering. So that's when the plant tissues have been damaged from kind of taking up too much water. There's too much happening and it has damaged the plant tissues, and they will be wet and mushy. And like I said, the tissues of the leaves will be kind of see-through. So alter your watering regime with that. On the other kind of subtopic there is that your whole leaf could be yellowing, however it's dry, and often if you leave this a couple of days, it will turn kind of crispy, and that's a sign that it's too dry. So essentially the roots have probably become desiccated, like just absolutely destroyed, because there's no water anywhere. And then the plant will start to get rid of some leaves, either probably by choice to have less plant tissue to sustain, or just because the tissue is damaged. So in both of those cases, of course, you do want to alter the watering, but if it's not being fixed, I would always go and check the root systems. So like I said, the roots could be desiccated, crumbly and dry, or they could be starting to rot, and that's when they're all mushy, and it can often come with the smell as well. So it's a watering issue with all of those. Finally, on the yellowing leaves, there is also the subject of pests. So if you have yellowing leaves and you've kind of you've gone through troubleshooting all the other aspects, and you're kind of happy that, hey, I am fertilizing regularly without any burn, my watering schedule hasn't really changed, or my environment hasn't really changed, and I can't really figure out what's going on. Or if you see active pests on your plants as well, that can be an indication that the plants are yellowing because of a pest problem. So that leads us on to number 2, is pest issues. So if you see some tiny some very fine webbing between parts of your plant, and also maybe some kind of white moving little specks, that is spider mites. And spider mites thrive in kind of dry conditions and will often lead to dry, crispy leaves. And once you see the webbing, it's usually pretty significant of an infestation. So how I deal with that personally, I have tried and had success with kind of battling pests over the years. However, my approach now is just, why would I bother? Unless this is like an heirloom plant that you're obsessed with and you cannot part without it, I will generally just compost any plant that is having a big infestation. And then I would treat plants that were all surrounding that one, to make sure that they don't spread further or become a larger issue. Now, if you do want to treat it, personally, a diluted alcohol spray, and kind of even using like an old makeup brush that's quite soft, you can put the diluted alcohol spray on that and kind of rub it on the plant tissues, and that will kill them. But you need to keep up with the treatments. Like, you need to do it every couple of days for a couple of weeks to break the cycle. And you can have success, but it is a lot of work. So if you have yellowing leaves and you're noticing some white fluff, you could even see some white insects as well, and they're generally like in crevices in the plant. It could be at a node or the part of the plant where the leaf meets the stem. Generally in those little corners you'll see them. These are known as mealybugs. Now mealybugs are not something I would throw a plant over, or throw a plant out over, because you normally notice it before it gets really, really bad, and it is quite easy to treat them. Often you can just get a Q-tip with a small bit of diluted alcohol and kill the insects and wipe it all around the areas where the white fluff is. They're very visible. You'll catch them before it gets really, really bad. Something that you could see walking around botanical gardens, and you can see them in kind of larger groups there sometimes. They'll often have, well, not all of them, but they'll often have beneficial insects that are working to kind of eat them. Now, the next pest is kind of, I wouldn't really consider it a pest, because they generally don't harm your plant, but they can be an indicator that something else is wrong with your plant. And these are those small little annoying flies. Now, I get asked this quite often. What are these small black flies in my plants, and how do I get rid of them? So these flies are also known as fungus gnats. I believe they're closely related. They're either in the same family or closely related to mosquitoes, and they don't bite you or anything. This is generally when the surface of the soil of your plant is wet. So they need a wet surface of the soil in which to lay their eggs. And that's kind of how the population can get out of control. So you might notice one or two one day, and then maybe a week later, then there's suddenly loads and they're all over your plants. Now, to be honest, I always have a small level of fungus gnats in my collection, but it never gets to the point where it's like a lot. And it might be just, I don't notice them until I'm going to water my plants, and I may move the plant and one will fly off from the surface of the soil. That's fine to me. That doesn't bother me at all. Ways to kind of manage the population is not letting your soil be wet for too long. So once the surface kind of dries out, that might kill the eggs, and they're not really able to establish a huge population. So because I let pretty much all of my plants dry out before I water them, that's never really been an issue for me. However, if you're finding that it is an issue, it might be that you're overwatering your plants. The soil is staying wet for too long. So your substrate could be an issue. I often see this probably most of the time when people use outdoor compost indoors on their houseplants. And while I do use some of that in my mix, it is not like the entirety of my mix. So I'll add in other elements to kind of aerate the soil mixture, like perlite or bark or leca or whatever. And this creates kind of airflow within the mix and helps it to dry out. But if you have just a dense black compost and nothing else in it, it's going to stay wet for too long. And without the kind of natural airflow that we have outside, indoors, this is just going to be an absolute nightmare. And quite often, if you have fungus gnats and your substrate is too wet, this probably is going to lead to some root rot in your plant anyway. So if you see fungus gnats, you can deal with them in certain ways, which I'll mention now, but it could be an indicator that there's something else going on with your plant that you need to pay attention to. Now, if you find that, okay, I've gotten to this point, I need to change my substrate and I need to alter my watering regime, but I still have a high population, things you can do to get rid of them is these sticky traps are pretty good. They are either yellow. I think yellow is the most common for fungus gnats, but there also are blue ones. I'm not entirely sure if they work for fungus gnats, so let's stick to the yellow. But they're essentially attracted to the color yellow, and then they'll land on the sticky trap and they'll die basically. You can place these around your plant. Also, one of the most successful things that I used to use at the beginning of my plant care journey when this was an issue was mosquito bits. So mosquito bits are essentially these little pellets that have bacteria in them, and you dissolve it in water. You can get it online generally. I don't normally see it in garden centers here, but you dissolve it in water and then you use that water to water your plants. Now this bacteria essentially kills the eggs of fungus gnats, and if you keep doing that over time, it will destroy the population essentially. That is a very, very successful way to do it. Now obviously that targets the eggs in the soil, but you may want to also use the sticky traps for the adults so that they're not relaying. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. So if you're noticing kind of these kind of brown, I'm going to put some pictures because it's very hard to describe, but you can get kind of these speckled browning bits on leaves of your plants. Now this could be an indicator that you have thrips. This is what a thrip looks like. This is an adult thrip, but they have obviously different phases in their life cycle. And these are definitely, in my experience, the worst ever pest to have, and are so hard to notice. They are incredibly tiny, like incredibly tiny. They do not look like that picture I just showed you. They are really like a small black speck on your leaf. And they crawl, obviously, if you touch them. But yeah, they can really quickly decimate your collection. They can completely kill plants in a very short amount of time. They just work so fast. And because you don't notice them, you generally will only start noticing these issues once it's kind of gotten too far. So, like I've said before, I just compost them. I'm like, get that out of my sight. I'm not dealing with you. I have tried to deal with them in non-chemical ways before, and I don't know if it was ever fully successful. It definitely managed the population well, but it was something that I had to keep up with constantly, and it wasn't until I did use some chemical that I fully got rid of them, and then they were never reintroduced. I've never had the problem again. Obviously, I don't condone or endorse the use of any kind of chemical pesticide. They have many issues. It shouldn't be out in the outdoor environment at all, and that is quite hard to control even indoors. You have to make sure that nothing is going down the drain. Everything is drying out, drip drying. Be very, very careful, and obviously your own health as well. That was the only times that I ever used that. It was because of thrips. But because I don't want to use that stuff anymore, if I ever come across something that I suspect to be a thrip and my plant is struggling, I just put it in the compost, just get rid of it. So that was quite a bit on yellowing leaves and pests. And now I want to talk about something a bit less direct. If you're feeling like your plant is not growing, or its growth is really, really slow, or there's a certain growth element that's not happening. For example, if you have a Hoya and it's not flowering for you, it's never flowered for you. How do we deal with these kinds of things, and how do we troubleshoot what could be happening to that particular plant? So the first thing that I always do is obviously, if you don't know what specific species it is, try to figure that out, or try to figure out what it's close to, and look up its native habitat range. Very, very important. We have to remember that while we say houseplants, these are just plants that are indoors. They're plants that have existed somewhere, or are cultivars of something that's existed somewhere in the world. They've all adapted to their environments in certain ways, and the way that they grow is kind of telling you about where they're from. So this could be a cactus that likes dry, arid conditions. This could be certain types of Hoyas that like really humid, warm environments. It could be certain plants that like it being cold at night, etc., etc. So this is how you're going to figure out what will make it thrive. And it always has been my key go-to on how to grow my plants really big, or make them flower, or get them really kind of strong. And then once you've kind of researched that and you've written down kind of the main elements about the habitat that it's used to, then you start to think about, how do I replicate that in my own space? Now, obviously, we can't always replicate it. Most of the time we can't, but there may be certain things that we can change that will make it more suitable. For example, maybe you have a plant in a lower light area and then you've just read that this plant's native habitat, it actually doesn't like shade at all and it really likes to have a bit of sun in the morning or whatever. Move it to a higher light area and see how it does. I will note that any changes you make with your plants, give them some time to adjust. Plants are not on the same timeline as us. They work on an independent timeline and they take time to adapt to their conditions. Often when I get a new plant, that plant might not do anything spectacular for a year. That has happened with a number of my plants. And that's them taking their time. They're trying to figure out, where is this new environment? How can I, they're trying to learn about their new environment before they do anything. And then you'll often see after a year, after some time, then they explode in growth because they're now used to it. Just remember that. So if you are moving from a low light area to a higher light area, give it some time to adjust before you kind of decide, was that enough of a change for it? Pay attention to any growth that it does have. Does it look normal? The next section will be on weird or abnormal growth, but this could tell you something as well about your watering. So if the growth is really slow but it's also small, this might mean that it needs a bit more water. So I would check all of those elements first, all about the native habitat, see how you could replicate that in your own space. I'm trying to think of another example other than light. For air plants, they need a lot of airflow. Airflow is a key part of their habitat type, and so if you're not opening windows or having a fan or anything like that in your space, those air plants might not do well with that at all. It may be humidity. It may be that the humidity fluctuates too much. It may be that it's too low constantly or too high constantly. Often it's too low because a lot of plants would prefer higher humidity, but that could be something to change. Maybe different rooms in your house have different humidity levels. Maybe you could turn off the heating a bit more or something like that. So go through each of these. You could also repot, move it, whatever, and see how the plant does. So the last and final section is on weird or abnormal growth. So like I said, this could be that the new growth is really small. It could be slightly deformed. Probably the most often thing that happens to me is that, and generally on philodendron, that a new leaf will come out, but it won't fully unfurl. It will only unfurl half the way, and then a new leaf will start or something like that. Or it could be kind of wrinkly and just not looking right. It could be that your plant has a large internodal spacing. So that would be the space on the stem between two nodes, or where the leaves normally come from. And that could be really long and spindly. You could just get spindly growth in general. A lot of our cacti and succulents can have that issue. It could have an issue with stability, another one that massively impacts me because my plants grow too fast and then they don't have enough stability or a pole or something to give them that support, and they could start toppling over. So with the half kind of folded out leaves, I found that this can either be a watering issue or a pest issue. So if you're pretty confident that there are no pests, maybe you've done a preventative treatment, or maybe you've just observed it over time and there doesn't seem to be any issues, it's probably a watering issue. Maybe, in my experience, it's often that the plant has been too dry for too long. So it's kind of conserved a bit of energy water-wise to not fully furl out that leaf. So with the large internodal spacing or spindly growth, there could be a number of reasons for this. One of which could be it's actually actively looking for support, or it's generally with the climbers like the philodendrons and epipremnums, they're looking for something to grab onto because that's that kind of growth phase that they're in. So you could provide it with either a pole or a wall or something to give it that support. It could be inadequate lighting, that the plant is trying to get taller because obviously the sun is in the sky, that's what they are used to. And so they're trying to get taller to get maybe out of a canopy in a rainforest or something, and they're trying to get to that light source. In my experience, higher light will generally promote more compacted growth. And like I said, for cacti and succulents, spindly kind of long growth will indicate that they really want a higher light source from you. If you are having spindly growth and you have given the plant higher light and it's adjusting, you can also prune it. That can help either branch out or help kind of restart the plant in this new, better environment. So for small or deformed leaves, so in particular for your aroids, small leaves in my experience has been due to inadequate watering. So it's not so inadequate that it will lead to a yellow leaf or anything like that. It's actually a much more subtle way of your plant telling you. So in my experience, keeping my philodendrons and my climbers watered just a tiny bit more often was actually promoting much bigger leaves, because the plant is kind of confident that it's always going to have that water source and it can sustain bigger plant tissues. That's what I think it is anyway, and I've had great success with that. So I used to let them dry out a lot more, and now I don't, and that's drastically changed the size of the leaves, along with other things like lighting and support, of course. If the leaf is stuck or even deformed, it could be pests again, or it could be watering. So just have a look at that. But I will note that often it could be not something. So I could be adequately caring for the plants and in the same way that I always had, and sometimes I will get a deformed leaf on particular plants. I do find some plants are more susceptible to this than others. For example, my philodendron gigas and my philodendron melanochrysum also had these issues. But a big thing as well is humidity. So deformed leaves could also be a sign that the humidity is just not adequate enough. Now, I wasn't able to give them more than what they were getting, so I still continue to get those kinds of leaves sometimes. But that could be something to look at. So I think I've covered kind of the main issues. I mean, yellowing leaves, pests, slow growth, and weird and abnormal growth. If there's anything else that you're interested in knowing about, drop it down in the comments and I'll try to answer. Like I said, I can't cover everything, and I don't want this video to be really long, even though I know it's already pretty long. And I can't directly tell you what's wrong with your plants, but I hope this kind of explains it in a way of how to kind of draw out the information from what your plant is really telling you. And keeping in that kind of observer mindset and kind of observing how your plants react to certain things is, like I said, the key skill here. It's how you're going to learn, and it's how you're going to learn to listen to what your plants are actually telling you, because they are kind of telling us stuff all the time. It's just that we may not be open or know enough to even try to listen to that. So I hope that this has been helpful for you. If there's anything additional, like I said, put them in the comments below. And if you are looking for more of a sciencey kind of approach to this, please check out my Plant Basics series, which will be linked in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I hope that this can bring us closer to our plants and enjoy our plant care just a little bit more. And I hope that it will help you to have the skills to do this on your own as well and be more independent with it. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you very soon in the next video. Bye.